I was here to deliver an incredibly important secret this morning, a secret that I thought I was the only one in the world that knew. But unfortunately, my esteemed speakers prior to me have stolen my thunder. I was here to deliver the secret that Indian aviation is growing, but it looks like everybody knows that. So unfortunately, I will have to think of new things to tell you. I could begin by inventing another statistic on the growth of Indian aviation. You've heard 5 point something, you've heard 9 point something. So I will use an incredibly scientific way of describing Indian aviation, and I will say there is a humongous amount of growth still to come. I think Professor Dwarkanath opened up the cricket analogies, so I'm going to run with it. And I will say that if this was a T20 game, we're still in the second over of the first innings of the T20 as far as Indian aviation is concerned. And if we were in a 50-over match, then we're in the 5th over. I have a mathematics background, so you have to be at 10% in both. But the bottom line of that is to say that there is a lot of growth coming in Indian aviation. So what does that mean? And how will that evolve? And this is where you get into some really weird stuff in terms of how this is going to evolve, because my view is that we will have at the same time we will have too many airports and too little airport capacity. We're going to have too many airports and too little airport capacity. And I think Professor Raghuram alluded to that potentially in his speech earlier on, but I will give you a sense that every politician in India, every state is going to want to build an airport, and we're going to have too many of them. We're going to have a concentration and focus of demand in several of the top-tier cities. There's just not enough space to build enough runways, and we're going to have too little capacity. I was part of the inauguration of Navi Mumbai Airport. I had the pleasure of seeing Prime Minister Modi speak, and he is an amazing orator. But I can tell you that already Mumbai has too little capacity. Already Delhi has too little capacity, and you can go around the metros and they have way too little capacity. This will play out over the course of the next several years, and you will find, like I said, at the same time, these metros having too little capacity, yet we'll have too many airports, because airport is a sign of political advantage. And by the way, this has nothing to do with India. This is the way it played out. If you all were to visit Japan 20 years ago, you will find that the Japanese politicians did the same thing, and there are too many airports in Japan, a lot of which are unused. Yet at the same time, some of the most constrained airports, one of the most constrained airports in the world is Tokyo Haneda, which is at the heart of Tokyo. And we will see aviation in India play out. In fact, that leads me to another theme that I will talk about briefly, which is there are many things in India that we do differently. Professor Raghuram talked about the wonderful culture of Indians to leave people at the airport and receive them. My wife and my father did that from the first 3 or 4 trips that I took. When it was trip number 127, they just said, forget it, you go and come on your own. We're not going to, in fact, they don't even wait up for me. My food is left in the microwave for me to press a button and eat on my own. So I think some of that aviation culture is going to evolve in a particular manner. And I'll tell you a different analogy. So Indians are different from Germans, who are different from Chinese, who are different from Japanese, who are different from Americans. But I think there's a certain unifying force across all of these, which are taxi drivers. In any country you go, taxi drivers are just about the same. And I think that kind of aviation culture is going to exist in India as well, where over time, the goodbyes at the airport are perhaps going to go away, and we will evolve in the same manner as aviation has evolved in every other part of the world. So my advice to governments is to not reinvent the wheel. I realize that I am at a talk sponsored by 2 very esteemed institutions. I appreciate that. And I don't want to in any way propagate plagiarism, because in academia that is horrendous. But in business, as long as you're not violating intellectual property rights or violating and infringing on patents, I will say we should be shameless about copying aviation development from other countries in the world that are more developed than us and not have to worry about reinventing the wheel. That's just easier. And so that's a little message to all of you as you take it back to your various constituents. Let's be shameless about copying from the more developed aviation economies. So too many airports, yet not enough capacity. That's something that we will have to live with and solve over the course of the next 20 plus years, because aviation in India is growing tremendously. Okay, the other part that I, as the CEO at Jet Airways, had to grapple with was what kind of demand is that going to be? Because everywhere you look, people are talking about low-cost carriers. And this is one of the first few questions that I had to answer when I got to India 7 months ago. My view is that the good news in India is that the economy is growing, business is growing, and I believe that in Indian aviation, you are going to see an equally strong growth in business traffic and an equally strong growth in high-end leisure traffic. The amount of disposable income that the middle class has is going to grow tremendously over a large period of time. And the reason I had to answer it is because one of the first questions for me was, do we want to turn Jet Airways into a low-cost carrier and compete on the same footing, or do we want to be someone different? And I think you've seen the answer, but let me state it for those of you that might not have been as alert as I would like you to be at 9:30 on a Saturday morning. We will continue as Jet Airways to be a differentiated service provider, because my belief is that corporate traffic will rise tremendously over the course of the next 20 years. We don't need to be another LCC. High-end leisure traffic will rise for the next 20 years. We don't need to be another LCC. Now, of course, to be successful, we do need to address our cost base, because most people will pay 10, 5, 7% more for a differentiated experience. They're not going to pay 40% more to travel between here and Chennai. And so there are areas of our business that we need to address, but we will address them, and we will continue to be a differentiated service provider in this particular space. So the good news for us is that corporate demand is rising, high-end leisure demand is rising just as fast. And it's not just in aviation. You look around at the number of high-end hotels that are being built. You look around at the number of high-end European cars that are littering the streets of India, and this is an area that I think we can capitalize on as well. Part of the reason I say that is also because this notion of transportation driving the economy that is talked about, I can tell you that is absolutely real. And in fact, that's part of the reason why the politicians want to build these airports, is because it is actually true that an airport can drive the economy of a city or a state or a country. I spent a number of years in Dallas-Fort Worth, where in the early 80s, they built 7 runways. 7 runways in a city with a population of less than 3 million people. 7 runways. And today, the economy of Texas, the economy of Dallas-Fort Worth has grown as a result of that particular airport. So my view is that state economies and city economies will be driven by the airport infrastructure, and will be driven in a manner that we haven't seen here, but some of the other mature aviation economies of the world have experienced. So if any of you have an extra $1 billion to spare, I would say build an airport, but build it with 7 runways, because we haven't even talked about the demand of cargo and logistics carriers. There are 1,000 planes in the US that are owned by the likes of UPS and FedEx, 1,000 planes. And India is a large country. And these airports that drive these 1,000 planes are in the middle of nowhere. They literally are in the middle of nowhere. Fayetteville, Arkansas. I don't think many of you might have heard of that. Certainly most of you might not have been there. The home to several hundred planes. We can put a plane in the middle of India, or an airport in the middle of India with 7 runways, and it will be used over a period of time. So we got to be smart about where we build our capacity and how we build our capacity, but it will drive the economy of the country. It will drive state economies and will drive the economies of various cities. I think over time, Indian aviation will see consolidation. I was very happy to know that Air India is up for sale. I'm hoping that you'll get a smart buyer for it. And that will be one of the legs of consolidation that will take place. We've seen consolidation in Europe. We've seen consolidation in certainly North America. There's been forced consolidation over the last 15 years in China, and you will see consolidation over a period of time here in India as well. I think it's healthy. I think aviation is a business of scale, and I think it's healthy for that to happen. Let's see how that unfolds over the course of the next 10, 15 years. The last point I want to leave you with is how aviation will evolve in India, or how aviation and airlines in particular need to evolve in India. And I think one of the things that we will get better at as airlines is the use of data and analytics. Historically, aviation in India has been run with a bit of gut. I think that's good. But as you start getting 100 planes, certainly as you start getting 200 planes, you need to be much smarter about how you use data analytics. And there is no dearth of data analytics when it comes to running an airline, whether it's in operations, maintenance and engineering, on-time performance, revenue management, networking, the use of data in marketing, customer experience, frequent flyer programs. There's no dearth of data, but there's certainly a scarcity in the analytical capabilities that airlines across India have. So I think over the course of the next 10 to 20 years, you will see the need for a number of smart MBAs. You will see the need for a number of very smart data and analytical folks. And I think that's what's going to drive aviation, in particular in India, as it has in other parts of the world as well. So those are some random thoughts I'm going to leave you with, because the secret of the growth in Indian aviation was always already stolen by my colleagues. So I had to talk about a few other things. I will leave it relatively short. I've got 2 minutes to spare, but I will leave that for question and answers. So thank you all very much, and look forward to a few questions later on.